Hey, what's up? Hello. We're back with some more Sammy Ingram 2 content. I had a couple of comments, not a crazy amount, but one is more than enough, telling me that you guys want to see some paranormal content. So it's literally my job to deliver. And so that's why today we're going to be talking about black-eyed children. Have you ever heard of black-eyed children? Have you ever encountered one? Do you know what they are or what the story about them is? If not, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to read some encounters with black-eyed children. Now, if you don't know, black-eyed children are exactly what they sound like. They are little things that look like children. They can range from ages 6 to about 16. A lot of times they do show up in pairs, and they are always portraying they are always trying to convince you to help them. So essentially, from the common denominator of all of the encounters with them, they will come to your house and knock on your door, or they may come up to your vehicle and knock on your window. Either way, all of the encounters have the one thing in common, where these children act like they need your help, and they are basically insisting that you need to help them, you need to let them in. Either let them in your vehicle or let them in your home. And at first, in most of the encounters, they can't see their eyes. They're usually dressed in like hoodies and normal children's clothes, but their heads are usually down at first, and they don't really reveal their eyes to you right away. Now, some encounters did say that they were wearing like outdated clothes, but a lot of them said that they were wearing a hoodie or something where you couldn't really see their face. Basically, they look like normal children, okay? They're acting a little creepy, but the biggest thing that people reported was the feeling. The feeling that they got in the children's presence. They reported an overwhelming feeling of fear, being uncomfortable, like there's just something absolutely not right with the situation. And while you might be morally encouraged to help these children, it is recommended that you do not do that. Apparently at first they will say something like, hey, I need to come in and call my mom, or I need help, or let me in your car and take me to my mom. And you will probably really want to do that, because who doesn't want to help a child, you know? But it's the feeling that you get from them that has really kept people from just giving right in. It is usually that overwhelming feeling that stops them from, stops these people from letting them in or letting them in their car, whatever. And so usually at first when you say like no, or I know one encounter they were like, let me, just give me your mom's number and I'll call. They get very adamant about it. And eventually they reveal their eyes. And that's when you really know, don't let them in your house. There's a lot of speculation as to what these things are. Obviously they're not children. They're something pretending to be children to gain your trust and be invited in. I personally think they're demons. That's what I personally think, and that is mostly because they need to be invited in. They need permission, and usually A demon needs permission to get into your home or your life in general. And so that's what they're trying to get, your permission, which is why they get so adamant when you don't want to help them. And they get almost irritated and forceful. So the earliest sighting of one that we know of was in 1996. It was by a man named Brian Bethel. He was a journalist in Texas. So he had stopped at a parking lot, like a movie theater parking lot, to write a check or something like that. So while he was writing this check, he wasn't really paying attention to his surroundings, and two boys walked up to his car and he didn't notice until the older boy, or the bigger boy, tapped on his window. So he rolls down his window and is immediately hit with this feeling of fear. He called it a soul-wracking fear. So the boy says, I was gonna see a movie, but I left my money at home. Can you take me to my house to get my money? It won't take very long, and we don't have a gun or anything. We're just two kids. Which he found to be very unnerving. Like, why did you need to clarify that? That's fucking weird. So basically he was like, well, the movie you're trying to see has already started, so by the time we were to get back, it would already be pretty much over. You know, trying to kindly say hell to the no. So he says it wasn't until he broke eye contact with the boy that he was really just overcome with fear. And then he noticed the boy's eyes were completely blacked out. The older boy got pissed and said, we can't get into the car unless you give us permission. Well, yeah, that's kind of the point. I won't be doing that. So basically, he left. And he said it's something he will never freaking forget. And he still stands by his story to this day. So basically, once this forums like Reddit and creepypasta and stuff were created, that's when his story had gotten posted on those forums, and it started bringing about people who had also had encounters with black-eyed children, and they started telling their stories. And some of their stories were from way before even that, back in like even the 70s and stuff. So like, this has been a known thing for a long time, but with the internet, that, you know, that's when things become known about, they become more prominent. So supposedly the kids are more likely to approach someone who already like knows about them. The warning is that, especially on Halloween, be aware of your little trick-or-treaters and don't let them in your house. Now I'm gonna read you some stories from other encounters with these black-eyed children. Midnight Caller. This one is titled, "It almost felt like a dream. I woke up to my dog Lucy barking. She was upright on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping with our 22-month-old daughter, staring at the door like an unknown stranger was out there rummaging around. I thought she was just freaking out over a house noise. We'd only had her for 3 months and she was still a puppy. It could have been anything. Our roommate, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. I wasn't too concerned initially. I decided the best bet would be to open the door and show her nothing was there." Do what? Why would you? No, I'm not opening my door at night under any circumstances. Anyway, sorry. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do with our daughter when she gets scared, and I figured it should work with a puppy too. I opened the door and she raced to the front door. She stood there snarling at the door. It was an angry, violent growl, one I had never heard her make before. I looked groggily at her and opened the baby gate blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show her everything is okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Lucy went wild. She started barking and jumped toward me, and when I touched the metal, she suddenly changed her temper. She whimpered, almost like she was afraid and backing down. As her mannerism changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I had been flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I looked through the peephole, and I can't explain why I looked, but I did. Outside were two kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than me and didn't look much younger. I'm 21 and she had to be 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was a light shade of honey blonde and she wore it long, about mid-back, with long, thin, blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans, a light wash that's popular right now, and a thin-looking olive-colored pullover style hoodie. She held the hand of a small girl who looked to be around 3 or 4 in the same style jeans and a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly, but she had the same shade of hair tied back in a ponytail. She held a stuffed toy under her free arm and it was identical to one my daughter has, as was their style of dress. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have asked these children in and given them some tea or hot chocolate to get them out of the bitter cold. Something about them seemed off. At this point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled, nothing. I hadn't turned on any lights. These kids had no indicators that I was at the door. The older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong, and accentless. She held her head tilted downward and I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood frozen in fear. How did she know I was there? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through her bangs before. They were black, or midnight blue, or a dark, dark purple. They were otherworldly. She said, "Our mother is worried." As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second she looked at me through the door. I have never been one to believe in these things. As a staunch atheist and skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, I had written off many a ghost story from friends and family members eager to tell their tale. I didn't believe it. Still, I couldn't rationalize my way out of this. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and a black-eyed kid. There was no questioning what was right in front of me. I did not answer her. I slowly and silently backed away from the door, Lucy still cowering at my ankles. She kept talking. "Just let us in to use your phone." I took another step back, and with that step, the tone changed. At first, she seemed polite. When I took the second step, she became commanding, almost hostile. "We're not gonna hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in." "I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone?" Lucy snarled at the door, and I inched backward, though something inside me seemed to be pulling me back toward the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to go back and let them in. I got to my room, covered up the window, locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of the nightlight. I heard her call me back to the door once more, and then quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I haven't slept right since. I know from reading about them that black-eyed kids can't just come in without permission. I know they haven't hurt anyone, but I still fear that I'll be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was just a dream. He keeps telling me to forget it, but the lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when the house is silent at night, this fear of a knock at the door, this tells me otherwise. You did the right thing, girl. Halloween. This is so funny. I'd never heard of black-eyed kids before my incident, so I come on here to post my story, and the first story I see is about a black-eyed kid. Weird. Let me preface this by saying I'm by no means a writer, just a domestic engineer living in North Texas. Also, I don't believe in the paranormal, ghosts, demons, aliens, whatever. However, I did have an event happen to me this Halloween that I have to admit has me scratching my head. This is my first post on Reddit, so sorry to say I'd never even heard about it until yesterday. I told my best friend about my incident, and she's an avid reader of No Sleep, and she told me if I didn't post it, she would. So here I am. Anyway, hope you like. So it had been a slow trick-or-treating night in our neighborhood that evening, which is pretty odd in itself. We usually have kids from different areas dropped off in ours and have a constant parade at our door. That night, I'd say we had no more than 8 or 10 groups of kids come by the entire night. It was about 9:30 and my husband and I were sitting in our family room watching some of those ghost shows based on supposedly actual events. Like I said, I don't believe in that stuff, but I do like a good ghost story now and then, and it was Halloween and all. We hadn't had any activity at the door in over half an hour, and it was getting late, so we decided to turn the porch light off and let our dog Chloe out of her crate. Chloe is an American Bulldog and is very docile. We only put her in her crate because we were afraid she'd try to get out and play with all the kids, and I didn't want to have to chase after her down the street. Also, we didn't want her to scare any of the kids because she would look a little intimidating to the younger kids. So I turned the outside light off, let Chloe out, and she followed me back to the couch and laid down at my feet. It was getting close to 10 o'clock when my husband decided that he'd had enough fun for the night and was going to go upstairs, take a shower, and get ready for bed. After all, it was Thursday, and he still had to get up early the next day. My teenage son was out with his friends at a local haunted house and wasn't expected to be back for another hour or so. So that left me alone on the couch with Chloe. Now, just because I don't believe doesn't mean those shows don't freak me out a bit, and being alone now watching, I'd have to say was kind of on edge, as it were. It wasn't long after I heard the upstairs water for the shower turn on when there came a light knock, knock, knock at the front door. My initial reaction was, what the hell? Really? It's almost 10, go home. But soon an uneasy feeling came over me. Why the knock? Our doorbell glows in the dark, and without a porch light it would be extra obvious to anyone out there. I paused. I couldn't really just ignore it. Our front door has a big beveled glass panel, and anybody right at the door could see in enough to see someone was in the family room watching TV. It would be pretty rude of me to just sit there and not answer it. Knock, 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 again from the door. I glanced down at Chloe and she was gone. My gaze followed her usual path to the front door, expecting her to be on her way there as she normally does. Nothing. She wasn't there. I stood up to look around the room better and found her crouching by the back door like she was wanting out. However, she never asks to go out like that. She always comes and licks my hand or puts her head on my knee. This was totally out of character for her, and I'd have to say it heightened my anxiety. Chloe, crate, I said. She just turned back to look at me like, hell no, lady, I ain't moving. I yelled up to my husband, but if he was already in the shower, I knew there was no chance of him hearing me. Knock, knock, knock. About this time, a car drove down our street and cast just enough light on the door to where I could see the silhouettes of two small children through the glass. I instantly felt relief. It was just some kids, probably a couple of my neighbors on their way back home and wanted to stop by and show me their costume or something. I headed to the door and looked back to make sure Chloe wasn't going to follow me. What a great watchdog though, I thought to myself as she just sat there. I turned on the porch light when I got to the door, and sure enough, I could see through the glass that it was a couple of pretty small kids. A little late for such young ones, I thought, and I began to wonder what kind of parents would let their kids run the streets that late at night. I only opened up the door enough to where I could block Chloe's escape if she decided to grow some balls, which was only about 2 feet. What struck me immediately as odd was that the kids weren't wearing any costumes. They were in normal street clothes. Also, no customary trick-or-treat either. I began to feel very uneasy again. It was a girl and a boy. The girl to my left was older, I'd say about 11 or 12. I could tell she was blonde, but I couldn't make out any distinct features as our lights are from high above on columns at the front porch, so most of the light was coming from behind them. I had not opened the door wide enough for any light from inside to hit them directly. The boy was younger and about a foot shorter, I'd say 8 or 9, and looked to have light brown hair. The girl very politely spoke up, "Ma'am, can we please come inside and use your phone to call our mom?" As she spoke, something in the pit of my stomach was telling me something was wrong. What kid, even at that age, doesn't have a cell phone of their own these days? I couldn't remember the last time I'd had anybody ask to use my home phone. Hun, don't you have a phone of your own that you can call your mom on?" I asked. This is when things really got weird. Both kids turned to look at one another like they were gonna say something to one another, but neither ever spoke. They both turned back to me, and the girl said, "Ma'am, my cell phone battery doesn't have any charge left in it. Can we please come inside and call our mother? We're alone out here, and my brother is scared." I have to admit, there were two competing feelings going on inside of me. The first, that of a mother's heart that wanted to help these two small children get to their mom. The other, a sinking fear in my gut that was keeping the other feeling at bay. It was then that I noticed during the short conversation I'd already opened the door a few extra inches, which I was completely unaware of doing. I stopped. "Honey, why don't you give me your mother's number and I can call her myself?" Another pause. They again looked at one another. After a short moment, they turned back to me and the girl said, "Ma'am, my little brother has to use your bathroom. Can we please come inside while you call our mom?" And with that statement, the little girl moved closer toward the door like she was gonna just walk on in by me. As she did, she stepped into the light coming from inside the house, and I got my first real good look at her. Solid, jet black eyes. That's all I could see. That motherly instinct was gone and replaced by terror. I don't think I've ever felt that in my life. I could feel every hair on my arms and the back of my neck standing at attention. I closed the door to where just my face was able to stick out. The little girl stopped again and pleaded, "Please, ma'am, we're really scared and alone out here. We have to come inside. Please help us." Then, like on cue, both kids began to whimper and cry. That's when the fear took over and I shut and locked the door. "I'll call your mom if you give me the number," I shouted through the door, "but I'm not letting you in my house." I could still see them there standing on the porch, just staring at me through the beveled glass pane. Part of me wanted to run upstairs to my husband, but the bigger part didn't want to lose track of where they were. That would have freaked me out even more to not know where they were. After what seemed like forever, for probably only a few seconds, I decided I'd call my neighbor that lives across the street. As I made my way to the side table by our couch to my phone, I glanced out the back door. Chloe was nowhere to be found. We later found her in the guest room under the bed. When I got to my phone, I started to look for his contact info. It was only then that the kids stepped away from the door and began to walk to the street. As they did, I walked to the door to get a better look to see where they went, still not calling my neighbor. If you get close enough to the glass, you can see out enough to make out people's shapes, but you can't see much detail. Of course, standing that close to the door would make you pretty obvious to anyone outside looking in. From the door, I could see that the kids were still standing under the street lamp near my house, staring at me. As I lifted the phone to my ear, after calling, only then did the kids start walking down our street. I met my neighbor out under the lamp once he was out there, but the kids were nowhere to be seen. Like I said, I don't believe in any of this stuff and had never even heard about black-eyed kids before talking to my friend. What I really think, what I have to think, is these kids were just out yanking people's chains on Halloween night. But I will say this, they were good, really good at it. Scared the shit out of me and my dog. No ma'am, you did the right thing too, sister. Ain't no way, ain't no way. We'll read one more short one, and then if you want me to read more, I can do it in another video because there's a lot and they're pretty interesting. Okay, so this one's called "You Must Let Me In." On March 17, 2008, I had my one and only encounter with a black-eyed kid. Before my experience, I had never heard of anything having to do with black-eyed kids. I was 12. I was sitting outside of a hairdresser's in an old Chevy pickup waiting for my mom to get her hair cut. About 15 minutes had passed and I saw some kid walking back and forth along the sidewalk in front of my parked car. At first I thought I recognized him as one of my friends from school, so I banged on the front windshield until he looked my way. It was not anyone I knew. At this point, I was not scared at all, not yet. The boy walked over to the side of my car and just stares. I think to let me get a good look at his eyes, to freak me out. Let me tell you, if you've never seen a black-eyed kid, you have no idea what to imagine. Pupils black as the night sky. The boy whispers, "You must let me in." And then I locked the car doors and ducked down into the spaces below the seats. 5 minutes later, he was gone. When my mother got into the car, she told me a boy with black eyes had come to the hairdresser's and insisted for my mother to give him the keys to her car. She refused. Thank God she did. No. Okay. that is it for this video. I hope I freaked you out. And if you want me to read more stories, like I said, I will make a part 2 to this video. Just let me know in the comments. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you so much for watching. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.